Welcome back. We're back live, Bonnie. She's not able to hear. We're talking during the break, and she wasn't even able to hear me. But so we're back live now with Bonnie Yates with us on Skype and on the phone. Bonnie, for those of you who don't know, is a special education attorney of the highest order. She's amazing. Her law firm is here, G & Chow. And Bonnie, welcome back to the show.
Good morning. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Do you want to take a second and tell us a little bit about Here G & Chow and give us the disclaimer?
We can do that. Here G & Chow is a 6-attorney law firm in Culver City. We do special education and disability discrimination, although we're also getting involved in a lot more higher education matters, and I could talk sometime about what that means, but there's a whole bunch of people out there. Some have IEPs and some don't, and they go on to college, and they have all kinds of issues come up in college.
Yes.
That's kind of the higher ed piece. I think I'm just to give a disclaimer. I'm
Yes.
going to give it really quickly. We're not giving legal advice. We're trying to advise you about your rights generally under federal and state law. I'm licensed in California, so if you're in another state or you have a specific legal problem, there's kind of no better way to address that than to have a consultation with a live attorney who can focus on your specific question. But we think that talking generally about IDEA and understanding what it envisions for parents and students will help parents better understand what the state dyslexia guidelines refer to as, quote, jargons and acronyms that are ever present in the world of special education and systemic problems and so on. So we talk about all those. And we're trying to help you understand better a system which sometimes says it's one thing, but it's actually another.
Amen to that, sister.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to answer one question from last week, and then you're going to wrap up dyslexia, and if there's time, we'll get to some of the questions for this week. Okay. So the question from last week was, and we actually have it again on this week's, because we get this, I think it's the most often asked question, how do you get the school to give you a one-on-one aide? It's like some magic trick, right? That people...
Well, it's like one of those corals that has many branches.
Yeah.
But first of all, we understand why parents are repeatedly writing us in and asking us about this question. It's really the question for parents with a child on the autism spectrum. And for me, this whole process of learning about IDEA and learning about autism started in 1994 when my own child was diagnosed with autism. So the point, I guess, about that is in those days, it was a little bit easier and clearer because there were no programs for children with autism that were specific methodology programs in the main. So if you had a kid with an autistic diagnosis, he or she, or an autism eligibility, he or she would sort of be generally directed to the available drop-in special day class, non-categorical at your school. And I will never forget the day I visited one in Los Angeles and one in Culver City. Those were the placements the district was offering. I was like, oh my God. And it really helped solidify my decision to go to CARD, because when I saw how bad the district special day classes that were being offered to me were, I thought, well, I can always do that after I flunk it, or after we flunked at doing ABA. So in 94, we had the 1987 study published when Ivar Lovaas was still at UCLA, reporting on the results of his experience with giving children, young children, intensive, more than 30 hours a week ABA, and the results were quite encouraging. I am getting around to this one-to-one aid business, but I think one problem is people don't understand the history, and you kind of have to understand the history to understand where we are now. So the 1987 study, which is readily available on the web, and Shannon probably has like copies of it in her car. You know, I mean, it's a very, I'm just kidding, but it's a very seminal study. And
It's on my bulletin board in my office, not in my
and
car.
the reason we're bringing it up is because districts don't educate people about autism in what is it that we say? IMHO. So, so we have to go back to the beginning to remember that the standard, the best practice is 30 to 40 hours a week of intensive one-to-one behavior therapy supervised by a board-certified behavior analyst. Well, in the 90s, what the districts did was they tried to claim that they had their own autism program, and they took the best elements from each program out there, and they said that they had an eclectic program. Then people started really pushing back with the research and saying that the district's programs weren't research-based. So then the district started, quote, training people, unquote, to do behavior therapy in general ed in the public schools. And then we went through about a 10-year period where what we were fighting about was that we wanted a trained, qualified aide, which we believed was most readily found in a non-public agency program run by private individuals who contract with the district rather than district ABA programs. So we had a lot of fights about that. And now what I'm seeing is that those district programs that they created, which, by the way, are not based on any outcome data or anything as far as I can tell, and they typically involve online training and not a lot of follow-up, and it's kind of sink or swim stuff. And that's dangerous because when you don't give adults enough of a toolkit for working with children that have communication and behavior problems, you end up with adults that get frustrated and they don't always know how to deal with that frustration in a way that's not destructive. So, and these are just my opinions. Other people can disagree, but this is what I've seen. So now it's like if you want a one-to-one aide at school, it'd probably be a good idea to go back and look at the 87 study, because one of the things about the 87 study is that it emphasized the need for multiple interventionists so that the child did not become dependent on one style of instruction to learn in the classroom, even though a lot of the times they have one person all week long. But also, the 87 study tells us about the intensity and the frequency of the program. And so public schools now are basically doing all kinds of things to get away from giving even one-to-one aides. They have something that is totally made up, and it falls under the category of acronyms and jargon, okay? Acronyms and jargon is what the California Department of Ed was referring to in the discussion about parents with dyslexia managing their IEPs and stuff. But acronyms and jargon, there's something called a Special Circumstances Instructional Aid Assessment, or a SCIA.
Yes.
SCIA. And I don't know if this is dreamed up by some school district or their attorneys help them, but a SCIA is what you might get confronted with if you ask for a one-to-one aid. And it's only an assessment that's given, I mean, mostly only after parents ask for a one-to-one aid. And it basically is, I guess, kind of a functional behavior assessment. And what we typically see is that the district doesn't want to give the aid. Then it does the SCIA, which is kind of this made-up assessment. And then they say the SCIA supports not giving the one-to-one aid. So watch out for those SCIAs because they're out there. The other thing they do is they say that your whole program is going to be, your social skills program is going to be managed by the speech therapist, which is improper because they don't necessarily have behavior training and they don't have the time to do the training. And then, maybe you'll get a little, fortune cookie with a slip of paper inside that says lunch bunch, and you'll get to go to school and go to lunch bunch once a week for 30 minutes. So why am I going on at length about this? The need for one-to-one teaching for children with autism hasn't changed. It's not going to change. That's the way they have to learn in the beginning. They need one-to-one teaching, and they need concepts broken down into smaller chunks and then rechained, and priming at home and practicing social skills at home, and then working on them at school, which is the real laboratory. the only way you're going to be able to get a one-to-one aide, unless the district decides to give you one, and typically they do that when they're afraid and there's a safety issue with a kid, is if you have an assessment and the assessment looks at the child in his classroom with an eye to whether or not the child can have success in the general ed classroom, which is the preference. And if the evaluator thinks that he can be successful in that way, the evaluation would look at that and discuss that. So really, we're back to, you need an outside evaluation that you either pay privately for or you have done at district expense. The district isn't going to budge until you've got a strong witness who's clinically trained, who can demonstrate why there's a need for one-to-one. So everybody's dealing with this issue because we all need, one-to-one support for our children with autism. And I don't have any better way to get it than you get an expert evaluation, you present it in an IEP. If the district says no, you go to due process. I mean, the other thing you could do if you had a young child is you could pull them out of school and use your insurance-funded ABA and take data and see how much faster the student learns if he has a full-time ABA immersion, and then go back to the district and say, now I need this in the classroom. But there's no easy way, and the cost of a one-to-one aide is, even if it's not a very well-trained person, is significant enough so the district's not going to, agree to that unless they think there's a compelling need or there's a fight for it. So, and we frequently run into situations where the behavioral problems are defined very narrowly because we have some students that are very intelligent, they're kind of twice exceptional kids, and they don't have externalizing behaviors or behavioral excesses. But what they do have is behavioral deficits, things that other kids their age are doing and they should be doing and they're not, so they're falling behind socially. And that's, one of the reasons that you need a one-to-one ABA trained therapist in the classroom. But the district is narrowly defining the behavior problems so that you in theory could get this all addressed by a few hours a week of something like speech or social skills or RSP support. The last thing about this is when the district offers anything, and you're entitled to ask questions to figure out if it is what it purports to be. So when you want to get into this discussion with the district about having a one-to-one, you'll find that they push back and they're defensive and they don't want to talk about the person's training, and they try to make you feel as if you shouldn't ask about it, but you should, and the right time to do it is at the IEP because your parental participation is hamstrung if you can't inquire about the qualifications of the aide or perhaps even observe the aide who's going to work with your kid
Absolutely.
30 hours a week.
It's a little bit of a minefield, and I know that it changes all the time, but do you find, because this is what happened for me that I'm told now after the fact. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening. But I went in because of coaching from somebody in your office. I went in and I used jargon terms to my benefit, and I said, look, I know my kid is entitled to FAPE, and you show me how what you would be doing is effective because I have these studies, and laid them out on the table, and I said my kid is entitled to FAPE in the least restrictive environment, and the only way it's going to work he can be in this classroom, and I've got this assessment. I had my ducks in a row because I was prepped by somebody in your office, and what I'm told now is that we got the aide because it looked like I knew what I was talking about. Do you find is that just an anomaly, or is that something you've seen in other cases where if the parent goes in with a lawyer that they go, all right, just give it to them?
Well, you and I haven't talked about this, but I always thought you got off easy, and I'm sorry to say that because it's pretty insulting to say that to any parent that has to have dealt with the system.
Right.
But I was surprised and pleased that you were able to get that without a big fight and without involving, attorneys. I also felt like it was maybe partially explained by the fact that your district was a very small district, and you came in at a time when they probably didn't really have too much in the way of autism programs. So they were in a more defensive position.
Well, I'm going to remind you of something that I think was more to the point, Bonnie. You had just won a similar lawsuit in the district right next to us. And
Okay,
that
well,
is
see,
that is why.
Who knows? Who knows? I think your result was anomalous. I think it's hard to get one-to-one trained people without a lawyer. I think it happens. I think it definitely happens. And when it does happen, if it's an outside agency that I'm familiar with, I breathe a sigh of relief. If it's a district person, the jury's still out on how that's going to work.
Right. Okay. But in general, if a parent sees that the district is not going to give them a one-to-one aide, the best possible move that I can see from what I went through and what you're saying to me is to lawyer up. Do you disagree with that?
I think what I said was they need an outside evaluation by a qualified professional justifying the need for the one-to-one. I mean, having a lawyer is useful and sometimes necessary, but the lawyer cannot provide the parent with evidence that supports their recommendation, and the lawyer's only as good as her evidence is.
Okay, so first get the evaluation, but...
or do it in tandem.
Okay.
You could do it in tandem because, if you don't, you need to know things like what to do when the district says your evaluator is only allowed in the classroom for 30 minutes. But the point is, I can't emphasize enough how dependent we are as attorneys on getting a one-to-one. How dependent we are as attorneys in having a good evaluation that observes the student in his classroom for a meaningful amount of time and so on.
Okay, cool. All right. So I love that response. Thank you so much for taking the time to do that, Bonnie. We want to give you time now to finish up the dyslexia piece that you were working on.
I was so hopeful that we could finish it up, but then I talked too much.
Oh, okay. No, I think we've got time.
So, a couple of things.
But you're a little bit muffled now. I don't know whether your mic got covered in the screen.
Okay. My paper problem.
Okay.
Okay. So in the dyslexia guidelines on page 63, there's an important chapter 11, called Effective Approaches for Teaching Students with Dyslexia. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You can go back and read it if you feel inspired. But it basically covers the importance of using evidence-based strategies, the principles and content of structured literacy instruction, the use of accommodations when educating students with dyslexia, and the use of progress monitoring data to inform the planning of subsequent instruction. And the reason I'm spending time on this is because I hear from so many parents that their children have a language-based reading disorder and they don't think the school knows what to do at all. Chapter 13 talks about what things people with dyslexia say that they need, and I figured that this would have broader applicability to kids on the autism spectrum that have an additional disability. The participants are basically saying they did a study, they interviewed people with dyslexia, and very quickly what they said was they need certain types of support from parents and professionals. They need support in exploring, developing, and understanding.
Bonnie, I just got to stop you for a second because we're barely understanding you. So whatever, if it's by the, there we go. Maybe that'll work.
Better?
Okay. Yep.
Any better?
Yep. It's much better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
That's okay.
Okay, so people with dyslexia need support in understanding their strengths, understanding and developing their strengths, in understanding that they require additional time to do things that other people can, typical tasks that other people can do more quickly. They need teachers to understand that, their disability is not all that they are, that they also can be very capable and have really valuable and interesting strengths. They need support in developing strategies for organization and time management and alternative methods to access information. So I think those are really interesting things for parents. Sorry, guys, I'm sorry. To consider with respect to their own children who might not be able to express their reading disability as such. And then there's a really nice section on assistive technology and why it's good for people with dyslexia. So they're talking about audiobooks, they're talking about text-to-speech, graphic organizers, smart pens, which sound really cool, and I want one, but I probably wouldn't be able to figure out how to use it. It says a pen that combines a camera and an audio recorder. A student can record notes with minimal writing, so she can focus on listening and processing information in the moment. She can listen to the recording again and again as needed, which is great because we know kids with dyslexia really benefit from repetition. Speech to text, which is going the other way from text to speech. Spell checkers, word prediction software. So those are some technology options that might be helpful to your student. And then the last part of this is we're really going to finish this. Parents who have a child with dyslexia have the right to have terms that are used at their IEP meeting explained to them. There's an acknowledgement in the guidelines that parents are victims of jargon and acronyms at IEP meetings that they cannot possibly understand, and that when somebody says, well, your child has a processing deficit in the area of blah, 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 you should be able to say, can you please break that down for me? I really don't understand what that means. The very last part of all of this is two things. One is a discussion about when kids with dyslexia will only need a 504 plan versus an IEP. I'm not going to spend time on that because I don't really believe that kids with dyslexia would benefit from a 504 plan. I think they need more intensive remediation. But at some point, if people want to know what a 504 plan is, we could definitely have some discussion about that on the show.
We actually have a question about that for next week, so we're good.
We'll do that next week. So if I can have one more minute, I can finish this.
You can. Every time the paper rustles, we lose you a little bit. So if you can hold the paper.
I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay, but I want to hear what you want to say. So if you can hold the paper still, we should be good.
Okay. Working on my paper holding skills. It's an IEP goal. I am a teacher and suspect that one of my students may be displaying signs of dyslexia. What should I do? Is it all right to alert the parents about my concerns? The answer is yes. There's a child find duty. Any child that's suspected of having a disability is entitled to an assessment at that point. I am a speech and language pathologist. What role should I play in helping identify and assess a student who may have dyslexia? Well, the study says that they've determined that speech and language specialists need pre-training so they can help prevent, identify, assess, and provide intervention to students with dyslexia. So that's pretty important.
That's very
okay, paper wrestling and apologies to everybody. Is an outside diagnosis of dyslexia necessary for a student to become eligible for special education? The answer to that, the quick answer, you can look at the FAQs if you want more, is no. Do all students with dyslexia require an IEP? They say no, but I say probably. My student's reading is slow but accurate. However, spelling is extremely poor. Could he still be dyslexic? The answer is yes. Because a specific learning disability is a disorder in one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using language, spoken or written, which may manifest itself in the imperfect ability to listen, think, speak, read, write, spell, or perform mathematical calculations. And they go on to say that spelling and oftentimes dysgraphia are things that you're going to see in somebody who has dyslexia. So you should definitely be concerned if your child is having trouble learning how to spell. So that's kind of a hallmark of a reading disorder. The last part about this, and we already covered it, is can the school district delay and not do the assessment and say, well, we're going to do some supplemental reading instruction? The answer to that, the quick answer is no. That's discussed in more detail on page 97 of the guidelines if you want more information about that. And the IP team, well, I'm not going to do that one. I don't think that's important. The last thing is, I'm a teacher and would like to receive training on how to use evidence-based, multisensory, direct, explicit, structured, and sequential training approaches when teaching students with dyslexia. Where can I receive that type of training? And the answer to that question is on page 98, and they give specific resources for teachers, and they also give information about what are called accessible educational materials for students with dyslexia. And if you go on in the FAQs, they have some information about free programming stuff that's available for people with dyslexia. I can't find the reference now, but there's a special reading program that's available and special Chromebooks for teachers who are working with students with reading problems.
Tell them again what the document is that you're referencing.
Yeah. California Dyslexia Guidelines, published by the State Department of Education in California, online as a printable document with links to really good stuff. Just, in closing, I'm sad that the Department of Education didn't make mandatory the guidelines mandatory duties for the district, but they didn't. But there's a gold mine of information in this document and lots of links. And so if you're a parent, and you have a reading problem, your child has a reading problem, go to the table of contents. You're going to find stuff in this document that'll be very helpful to you. So I feel like it took me about a year to get through this. This was a long exercise. I appreciate everybody being really patient, and we're going to move back to more autism-specific questions.
But these are all helpful for families that are trying to get best possible services, because they're guidelines that will, hold up, and we can say they're best practices. So Bonnie,
I feel like the AT stuff is really important,
Absolutely,
to be able
I agree.
to construct an argument for assistive technology that's actually a bona fide piece of assistive technology.
Absolutely, I completely concur. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Tell everybody really quickly how they can find Hirji and Chow.
Hirji and Chow can be reached at 310-391-0330 or at our website, lawyer4children.com. If you're in Southern California and you'd like a complimentary consultation with our office, you can call us or email us, and we'll set you up.
All right. Thank you so much, Bonnie, for being with us. We'll see you next week.
Paper wrestling. That's one of my IEP goals for ESY 2.19. Paper wrestling.
We got to find a better way. All right.
Okay.
We will talk to you next week.
All right, Shannon. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Okay. So we are, I'm trying to stop the paper wrestling. There we go. It's over. We are going to take a quick break because we're already behind. We're very excited that we've got wonderful guests that are going to be with us here in the studio. We're having Terry Hart and Harry O'Kelly that are going to be with us talking about MIME and the O'Kelly Lab. MIME is therapy. So this will be so super fun. Don't go anywhere. Stick with us.